The apron was still folded, just like I left it that morning, still warm from the iron, still holding the shape of a woman they never named. She used to hide behind it when thunder shook the house, wipe her tears on it when kids were mean, cling to it like it could shield her from growing up too fast. And yesterday, when the social worker asked her who I was, she didn't blink, didn't pause. She just said, "That's the maid." Not, "She raised me." Not, "She's my mama." Just, "The maid." I didn't correct her. I stood there, hands still smelling of lavender soap and lentil stew. She looked past me, and I tried to look through her. But something folded inside me too, soft and final, like a goodbye no one heard. If someone once erased your name but not your love, then stay close. This story might be yours too. She called 3 days before her birthday. "I'm hosting something small, just a few people from work. Derek's mom, nothing big." Her voice was brisk, uncomfortable even. "You don't have to bring anything," she added quickly. "But if you do come, maybe wear something simple, casual." I told her I'd make lemon pie, the one with the browned edges she used to sneak bites from. She said, "Sure," like it didn't matter. That morning, I pressed my navy skirt and wrapped the pie in a cloth. I put on the soft white cardigan she gave me on her 16th birthday. I tied my apron while the kettle warmed. Old habits stay longer than people do. Her house was neat. New paint, concrete planters with trimmed rosemary. Whitney opened the door and smiled at something behind me. Not me. "Hi, just leave the pie on the counter, okay?" she said. She walked off before I could speak. The living room buzzed with perfume and laughter. Tall glasses clinked. A woman I didn't know complimented Whitney's shoes. Someone else asked where the pie came from. "Oh," Whitney said with a laugh. "That's just Gloria. She's the maid. She used to help out when I was a kid. Kind of family, I guess." The words slipped from her mouth so smoothly, like it had been rehearsed. No one looked at me, but I felt the silence stretch. Then someone laughed, and the room kept moving. No one made space for me to sit, so I stayed by the napkins. I refolded them, one by one, just to keep my hands busy. I heard Derek's voice behind me. "Did you raise her?" I didn't look up. She was 5. Her mother passed. Her grandmother brought her to me. I stayed. His eyes stayed longer than his questions, like he was trying to understand something no one had explained. I smiled, just enough to pass as fine, not enough to stay. In the kitchen, I reached for the kettle. My fingers trembled just slightly. Whitney's voice drifted in from the hallway. "She's just always been there, like furniture, you know?" The kettle clinked against the burner, louder than I meant. No one turned. The apron felt tighter than it had all morning. Not comfort, not pride, just wait. A guest walked in holding a half-empty plate. She looked at me, puzzled. "Are you with the catering company?" I looked at her for a moment. "No, ma'am," I said, "just passing through." I untied the apron, slowly, folded it in half, then again, ran my thumb along the frayed edge. I held it to my chest like a shield I didn't know I'd carried this long. As I stepped out the back door, I glanced toward the hallway. Whitney was laughing. She saw me. She didn't call out. I walked home with the apron folded in my arms. No one noticed I had left. Not Whitney, not Derek, not the woman who mistook me for a server. The air outside was cool, dry, the kind of wind that moves but never touches. Inside, everything was still. I placed the apron on the counter, laid it flat. For years, I had folded things to make them smaller, neater, but some things didn't shrink. The kitchen smelled like lemon and old dust. There were 2 mugs in the sink from the morning. I didn't wash them. I sat by the window, looking out at nothing. She's just always been there. Her voice kept playing in my head, like I was a fixture, a background color. Once, I was her whole world. Now, I was the help she forgets to thank. I opened the cedar chest beneath the bed. My knees creaked. The lid resisted. Inside, the memories waited. The drawing of us as flowers. A photo from the mall. Matching scarves. A letter she wrote at 10. The ink was purple. Thank you for being my mom, even if no one calls you that. I kept it folded, read it every birthday she forgot to call. Pain doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it sits beside you, unmoving. I whispered to no one, or maybe to the part of me that still hoped. I remembered the first night I brought her home. She clung to a shoe, refused to take it off, just in case she had to run. I let the closet light glow all night. I lay awake in the hallway. When she finally fell asleep, I wept. Not from fear, but because something in me unlocked, like I had found the reason my hands were made. Years later, I sat by her hospital bed. Her fever had broken, but her lips were dry. I read stories to her about gardens and stars. I held her hand. She opened her eyes, looked right at me. "Mama," she whispered. It was the only time she ever said it. She never saw the scar on my side, never asked about the medicine I had to take. She didn't need to, because love, to me, was not something to be seen. It was something you gave, quietly, completely. And now she had rewritten the story. She made me a maid in her memory, erased the name I had carried for her. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself. Same lines, same eyes. But something inside me had stilled. Not dead, just quiet. I placed the apron over the chair in the kitchen. Not folded, not tucked away, just there, like I had been, always. It was 3 days after the party. The streamers were still flapping against Whitney's porch rail when Derek knocked on my door. He held a small paper bag and something softer in his face. A gentleness, maybe, or hesitation. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said. I had some questions." I let him in. The kettle had just started to hum. He sat at the table and looked around, his eyes pausing on the apron slung over the oven handle, on the faded photo of Whitney in braces, on the magnets spelling her name on the fridge. "I asked Whitney about you," he said finally. "She said you used to work for her family, that you were around when she was a kid, but something about the way she said it." He didn't finish. I poured tea into 2 mugs, set one down in front of him. "She mentioned being very sick once," he continued. "Said she had a kidney issue when she was 12, that it was serious, but she didn't remember much. She said she got lucky."
I let the words hang. Then I reached into the drawer beneath the table. My hands moved without needing to see. I pulled out a folder. The edges were frayed, and one corner curled like a dried leaf. "I always thought she'd ask one day," I said, "but she never did." He took the folder and opened it slowly. Inside were medical records, compatibility charts, hospital release forms, letters from the transplant team. He read in silence. The only sound was the spoon tapping against his mug. "She didn't know," he said quietly. "I was told she shouldn't," I replied. "Her grandmother said it would confuse her, that a sick child doesn't need the burden of knowing who saved her." Derek glanced back at the apron. "You were more than just someone who helped out." I smiled faintly. I cooked her meals, cleaned her clothes, mended her dresses, but I also signed my name to donate an organ. I sat in that waiting room for 9 hours. I watched the machines beep out her rhythm. There was a beat of silence. "She opened her eyes on the third night," I added, almost to myself. "She looked at me and whispered, 'Mama?'" Derek looked down. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't need that," I replied. "I didn't do it for praise.
I did it because I loved her." He closed the folder, hands gentle like he was wrapping a newborn. "I don't know if she's ready to face this." "I'm not asking her to," I said. "But you came. Maybe she will too." He stood. "She's not cruel," he said. "But sometimes, forgetting is easier than remembering who we owe." I nodded once. As he reached the door, he glanced back one last time. His eyes rested again on the apron. Its edge still held the faint, rust-colored stain. I didn't move it. For the next few days, there was nothing. No call, no knock. But on the fourth morning, I found a note in my mailbox. No envelope, just one sheet. It wasn't Whitney's handwriting. It said, "She read it, twice, then cried in the kitchen. She doesn't know how to ask, but I think she wants to." It was signed with a D. I stood holding that note for a long while. That afternoon, I opened the cedar chest beneath my bed. It creaked like it always had. Inside, wrapped in linen, was the apron. I unfolded it slowly. My hands brushed the threads, soft from years of washing, but the stain remained. A reminder of the night I collapsed after making her soup. My body still healing, my love still working. I sat there and remembered the beeping of the hospital room. The cold chair. The nurse who asked if I was her mother. And I remembered nodding, without needing to explain. I gathered the apron and laid it into a wooden box. I placed a photo beside it. Whitney, age 12, asleep under a blanket, and me, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand. My eyes were tired in that photo, but sharp, fierce in a way only mothers know. I started to write a note, but nothing I could say felt right. Instead, I just wrote her name on the lid of the box. I stood at her doorstep that evening. The sky was the color of old denim. I didn't ring the bell. I set the box down and walked away. I didn't plan it, not really. It came to me one morning while I was slicing apples. The light caught the apron on the chair, like a gentle finger pointing at something I had stopped looking at. I stood still. My hand rested on the fabric. It was soft in places, worn in others, and the old stain, still there. I pulled out the wooden box from the bottom shelf. It used to hold recipes. Now, it held things that no longer belonged in drawers. A birthday card with a crooked star, a pressed daisy, the first spelling test she ever aced. I lined the box with linen. Then I folded the apron slowly. My fingers smoothed the cloth like a prayer I hadn't said in years. I placed the letter she wrote at 10, the one where she called me Mom, on top, and one photo. She was asleep in a hospital bed. I was next to her, holding her hand, my eyes red, but steady. We didn't look like family, but we were. I raised her, not for credit, but because someone had to stay. I didn't write a note. What I wanted to say didn't fit into a sentence. It lived in years, and nights, and folded laundry. I closed the lid, held it for a breath, then slipped it into a plain paper bag. The next morning, just after sunrise, I walked to her house. The street was quiet, birdsong, the soft hiss of sprinklers. I stood at her porch. Maybe she was awake, maybe watching from behind the curtain. That wasn't my concern anymore. I placed the bag just beneath the porch chair, the same one where she used to sit reading, feet swinging, calling for lemonade. I stood for a moment, not to decide, just to remember. Then I turned. I didn't leave a note. I didn't wait for footsteps. Some truths don't need to be spoken. Some silences are enough. It rained the next morning. Not a storm, just a soft hush that made the world slow down. I sat by the window with tea. The chair across from me was empty, but the box was gone. I had checked quietly before the rain came. It wasn't there anymore. No note, no voice message, just space. And somehow, that was enough. I let the steam rise to my face. The tea was warm in my hands. Not hot, just warm enough to remind me I was still here. Outside, a bird landed on the porch rail. Its feathers puffed from the drizzle. It blinked once, then stilled. I thought of her as a girl, drawing houses with too many windows, sitting in that same chair on the porch, feet swinging, asking for more sugar in her lemonade. I never told her much about her mother. She used to ask if her real mom liked lemon pie. I never had the answer, so I just kept baking. The silence that day didn't sting. It felt clean, like something had been said without anyone speaking. Later that week, I opened the mailbox and found a small envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside was the photo, the one I had placed in the box. But now, on the back, in handwriting I hadn't seen since middle school birthdays, were 4 words. I know now. Whitney. I held the photo to my chest, not tightly, just enough. That evening, I brewed a pot of chamomile. I reached into the top shelf and took down her old teacup, the one with the little chip on the handle. I set 2 cups on the table, one for her, one for me, just in case, even if she never walked through that door. I already came home to myself. The window was open. The air smelled like rain and rosemary, and on the chair, the apron still rested, not folded, not moved, just there. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel forgotten. Not mother, not maid, just me. Still here, still whole. Some names are never spoken out loud. Some roles are never written in ink. But that doesn't mean they weren't lived. If someone once erased your place in their story, maybe it's time to write your own. You don't need their name for you. You already have your own. You don't have to send it. You don't have to explain. Just Let it rest somewhere. A drawer, a teacup, a folded apron, or a window left open, just in case they come home. If your truth has nowhere else to go, sweetheart, the email is just below. And if no one ever called you mama, but you loved like one anyway, then you are, and you always were.